It started with a scream, not loud enough to wake the whole neighborhood, but sharp enough to slice through the calm summer air that wrapped our little HOA community every evening. I was out front, watering my plants like I always did around 7 p.m. Kids were playing two houses down, sprinklers ticking, a golden sunset spilling over the roofs. Everything looked perfect, too perfect. Then it came again, a small muffled cry. From the house across the street, the one with the perfect white fence and the manicured lawn that won yard of the month 3 times in a row, Mrs. Landry's house. Everyone in our HOA loved her family, or at least pretended to. Her husband was on the HOA board. They threw those boring summer potlucks every year, the kind that made you smile just enough to hide the fact that you didn't care. But that night, something was off. I lowered the hose and listened. The laughter from the kids faded. Another sound, a thud. Then silence. I turned off the water, stood there, and just listened. There it was again, a child's sob, faint, desperate. I walked a few steps closer to the sidewalk, heart thumping. The blinds on the Landry house were shut tight, but one window upstairs flickered with blue light, like a TV flashing. I told myself, maybe I'm imagining it. But the next night, I heard it again and again after that, always around the same time, just after sunset, when everyone else was winding down and the HOA patrol started making its rounds. By the 4th night, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I walked over to the HOA office the next morning. Our president, Bob Keller, was there, a retired cop with a mustache that screamed authority and a belly that said donuts. He looked up from his papers when I entered. "Morning, Tom," he said. "Something wrong with your lawn again?" "No," I said, trying to sound calm. "It's about the Landrys. I think I've been hearing something strange from their house. Sounds like a kid crying or—" Bob cut me off with a chuckle. "You're probably just hearing the TV, pal. They've got 3 kids. You know how loud kids can be." "I'm serious," I said. It didn't sound like play. It sounded scared. He sighed, leaned back, and crossed his arms. "Tom, listen," he said. "We don't get involved in people's personal business. That's not what the HOA's for. What if it's something serious?" I pressed. "What if—" "Tom," his voice dropped low. "Don't get involved." I mean it. There was something in the way he said it. Not concern, not caution. It was a warning. I left the office that morning feeling like I'd just stepped into something dark. That evening, I sat in my living room staring out the window, watching the Landry's porch light flicker on. The sun dipped low, painting the street in gold and shadow. Then I saw movement. Mrs. Landry stepping outside to dump trash. She looked tense. She kept glancing around like she thought someone was watching her. Then I noticed her arm, bruised, not a little bump. A deep purple bruise wrapped around her wrist. And for a second, I thought she saw me watching. She froze, then forced a smile and waved weakly before hurrying back inside. Something twisted in my gut. I couldn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house made me think of that child's voice. I kept hearing it in my head. The whimper, the thud. Finally, around midnight, I grabbed my phone and went outside. I crossed the street, staying close to the shadows. The Landry house was dark, except for that same blue flicker upstairs. I turned on the voice recorder. I didn't know why. Instinct, maybe. Then, as I got closer to the side fence, I heard it again. A cry. Then a man's voice, muffled, angry. "Stop crying." I froze. There was a short silence. And then another sharp sound, like something striking. The cry turned into a sob. My hands trembled. I wanted to jump the fence, call the cops, do something. But before I could move, a motion light turned on. Bright, white, blinding. I ducked behind a bush as footsteps approached. A shadow crossed the yard, tall, broad shoulders. Mr. Landry. He stood there for a moment, scanning the yard, then went back inside. The light stayed on. I backed away slowly. Heart hammering, recording still running. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat there staring at the audio clip I'd recorded. I hit play, and the sound that came through made my blood run cold. It wasn't just crying. There were words. A small broken voice whispering, "Please." No more. The next morning I went straight back to the HOA office. Bob was there again, sipping coffee. "Tom," he said, not even looking up. "What did I tell you yesterday?" "I have proof," I said, slamming my phone on the table. "You need to hear this." He sighed, looked at me, then reluctantly pressed play. The recording filled the small office. The sound of the cry, the whisper. He didn't flinch. Not once. When it ended, he just stared at me. "Delete that," he said. "What?" "You heard me. Delete it. You can't go around recording people on private property. You'll get sued." "Bob, there's a child in danger," I shouted. "We have to do something." He stood up, his face turning red. "Drop it, Tom. The HOA's not getting involved. You don't know what's really happening in that house." I stared at him, disbelief flooding through me. "You knew." He didn't answer. I walked out, slamming the door behind me. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. Every time I glanced out the window, I saw shadows. Maybe my imagination, maybe not. Then around midnight, I heard a knock, 3 slow knocks on my front door. When I opened it, no one was there. Just a piece of paper taped to my door. It had one sentence written in bold, messy handwriting: "Stop asking questions." And that's when I realized this wasn't just about one family. This was something the whole HOA was hiding, something darker than I'd ever imagined. I didn't sleep that night. That note, "Stop asking question," kept flashing in my head like a warning light. I sat by the window, watching the dark silhouettes of the houses around me, every porch light flickering on and off like blinking eyes. This neighborhood was supposed to be safe. That's why I bought this house. That's why I joined the HOA, to live in a community. Now, it felt like I was surrounded by strangers, or worse, by people who knew something they weren't saying. The next morning, I went to see my neighbor Rachel, the one who lived right next door to the Landrys. She'd been here longer than anyone. Sweet, middle-aged, always smiling, always baking cookies for HOA meetings. When she opened the door, her eyes widened a bit. "Tom, you look terrible." "I didn't sleep," I said. "Can I talk to you?" "It's about the Landrys." At the mention of their name, her smile faded. She looked over my shoulder, checking the street. Then she stepped aside and whispered, "Come in." Inside, the smell of coffee and cinnamon filled the air. She led me to the kitchen and lowered her voice. "You heard it too, didn't you?" she said. I froze. "You mean the crying?" She nodded slowly. "Started about 2 weeks ago. Every night, same time. I called the HOA first. Figured maybe they'd send someone to check. But Bob came to my door himself. Told me I was overreacting. Said the HOA doesn't get involved in domestic matters." I clenched my fists. "He told me the same thing," she sighed. Then 2 days later, I got a notice. Said my fence was 2 inches too high. A violation. "Retaliation," I said under my breath. Rachel gave me a look, scared, defeated. "Tom, they control everything here. You cross them, they make your life miserable. I've seen it happen." "But this isn't about lawns or fences," I said. "This is a child." She stared into her coffee cup for a long moment. "You think I don't know that?" she whispered. That afternoon, I decided to gather proof. Not just sound, visual. I had an old security camera in my garage, one of those motion-triggered types I'd used for raccoons a few years back. I installed it facing the Landry side yard, tucked behind a bush where it couldn't be seen. Every creak of a door made my heart race. If they caught me, I'd probably be fined. Or worse. But the image of that child's voice, "Please, no more," wouldn't leave my head. For 3 nights, nothing happened. Just the sound of crickets, sprinklers, and the hum of cars in the distance. But on the 4th night, around 11:40 p.m., my phone buzzed, "Motion detected." I jumped out of bed, heart pounding, and opened the live feed. The camera showed the side of their house, faintly lit by the street lamp. Then suddenly movement, a small shadow, a child. He looked around nervously, clutching something, a small stuffed animal, and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then a man's voice shouted from inside. The boy flinched, turned, and disappeared back through the door. Then came another sound, a slap, and silence. I sat there frozen, staring at the screen, my jaw tight. I knew then I couldn't stay silent anymore. The next morning, I took the footage to the local sheriff's office, the deputy at the front desk. A tired-looking woman with a badge that read Miller barely looked up from her computer. "Sir, you said this happened..." "Where?" "In the Willow Creek HOA, the Landry House, number 112. She typed something, frowned, and said, "That's private property. Show A jurisdiction. You can file a welfare check request. But if the parents refuse entry, we can't do much without probable cause." I leaned forward, my voice shaking. "There is probable cause. I have video." She hesitated, looked at me properly this time. "Can I see it?" I handed her my phone, thumb trembling as I opened the clip. She watched silently. When it ended, she said, This could be something." She got up, went into the back room. 10 minutes later, she came back with a man in a deputy uniform, tall, serious, mid-40s. "Mr. Hayes?" he said. "I'm Deputy Reynolds. Can you email that footage to me? We'll open a case file." I nodded, relief washing over me. "Thank you. Just don't confront them yourself," he said. "Let us handle it." For the first time in days, I felt hope. That night, I went to bed early, exhausted but calmer. Until around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of a car idling outside. I peeked through the blinds. A dark SUV was parked across the street. Headlights off. I could barely make out the figure inside, but the silhouette looked familiar, a stocky man. Broad shoulders, Bob Keller, the HOA president. He sat there for several minutes, just staring at my house. Then he drove off. My stomach turned cold. The next morning, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, there he was, smiling like nothing had happened. "Morning, Tom," he said, too cheerfully. "Heard you've been busy." I didn't answer. "Mind if I come in?" he asked, already stepping forward. "No," I said firmly. "What do you want, Bob?" He took off his sunglasses and looked me dead in the eye. "You went to the police, didn't you?" I didn't respond. He smiled faintly. "See, that's a problem. Because this neighborhood has rules. We handle things internally. You start going outside, it makes us all look bad." "This isn't about your reputation," I snapped. "It's about a child." He chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "You really don't get it, do you?" "The Landrys are connected. Her husband's on the board. He's got friends. You're poking a bear you don't understand." He stepped closer. "Now I'm giving you one chance. Drop it. Take your camera down. Delete your footage. Stay out of it." I clenched my jaw. "And if I don't?" He smiled wider, that fake neighborly grin. "Then we'll find something wrong with your property. Your paint, your mailbox, maybe even your permit papers. HOA rules are funny that way. They can bury you alive." Then he turned and walked away, whistling like nothing had happened. For the rest of the day, I couldn't shake it. Was this really how far they'd go to protect one of their own? That evening, I checked my mailbox, and there it was. A notice. Violation. Unauthorized surveillance equipment. $500 fine, I laughed. I actually laughed out loud, but it wasn't from humor. It was disbelief. They were trying to shut me up. I took the paper, crumpled it, and threw it straight into the trash. That night, I called Deputy Reynolds. He picked up after a few rings. "Reynolds," he said, "it's Tom Hayes. Did you check on that address yet?" A pause, then we tried. The parents said the kid was at a relative's house. We didn't see any signs of distress. "Without consent, we can't go in." I gripped the phone tighter. "But I sent you the video, Mr. Hayes," he said gently. "We're doing what we can. Please don't take matters into your own hands." Then he hung up. The silence in my house felt heavier than ever. I looked out my window across at the Landry house. The porch light flicked on again. Then off, then on, like a signal. I stared for a moment, confused. Then I noticed, in the upstairs window, a small face. The boy. He was staring right at me. His lips moved. I couldn't hear him, but I could read the word. Help! And then, in a flash, someone yanked him back from the window. The curtain fell shut. I dropped my phone. And for the first time in my life, I was terrified not for myself, but for someone I didn't even know. The morning after the police raid, the neighborhood was silent, eerily silent. The same houses that once buzzed with gossip and judgment were now wrapped in shame and fear. No lawnmowers, no barking dogs, just a blanket of guilt that hung over every porch. I stood by my window, watching as police tape still fluttered in the cold air around the Johnsons' house. The blue lights were gone, but their echo, that flashing red and blue glow, still burned in my mind. The HOA had called an emergency meeting that morning. Inside the community hall, everyone looked broken. The same people who once shouted about keeping the neighborhood's image clean were now avoiding eye contact. At the head of the table sat Margaret, the HOA president, the same woman who told me not to get involved. Her eyes were red, makeup smudged, a mix of fear and guilt. For once, her voice wasn't sharp. It trembled when she spoke. We didn't know the situation was that bad, she said quietly. We thought it was just family issues. I couldn't stay silent anymore. You knew something was wrong, Margaret, I said, my voice rising. You all did. We heard the screams. We saw the bruises. But you told us to mind our own business. A heavy silence filled the hall. You could hear the hum of the ceiling fan, the shifting of chairs, the weight of regret pressing on everyone's chest. Mrs. Hall from across the street finally broke down crying. I saw him once, she whispered. The little boy. He was limping. I asked if he was okay, and he said he fell. I wanted to say something, but... Margaret said we shouldn't interfere. Margaret looked like she might collapse. I thought I was protecting the neighborhood, she said. We've had bad press before, property values dropped. I didn't want that again. I slammed my hands on the table. You were protecting the houses, not the people living in them. Everyone flinched. It wasn't just anger. It was the truth, ugly and undeniable. The police later confirmed that the boy, Eli, had been taken to a children's care facility. His father was in custody. And yes, there was proof of ongoing abuse, months of it. Eli's mother had left years ago. The HOA had never questioned why the boy rarely went outside, why his father always yelled when anyone came near. They had built a bubble of politeness, a fake paradise where no one dared to look too closely. Days turned into weeks. The Johnson house remained empty, its windows boarded up, a silent monument to our community's failure. But something had changed inside me, and, I think, inside all of us. Margaret resigned from the HOA. A new president was elected, Rachel, a mother of two who vowed to never let silence protect cruelty again. The first thing she did? Start a community watch for welfare, a group dedicated not to spying on lawns, but to looking out for each other. My final conversation with Eli 3 months later. I got a call from the child welfare officer. Eli wants to see you, she said. He remembers your voice. When I walked into that small counseling room, my heart was pounding. Eli sat on a chair, tiny legs swinging, holding a small toy car. His arm was in a soft cast, but his eyes, those terrified eyes I once saw behind a window, now had light. You're the man who called the police, he said quietly. I nodded. Yeah, buddy. I just wanted to make sure you were safe. He smiled. The faintest smile I'd ever seen. Thank you, and that was it. 2 words. But they felt heavier than anything I'd ever heard in my life. I wanted to tell him I was sorry. Sorry for waiting so long. Sorry for believing the HOA's words. Sorry for thinking silence was safety. But I didn't. I just nodded and said, You're going to be okay now, Eli. That spring, the HOA started doing things differently. Instead of newsletters about fence paint, we held workshops on mental health awareness. Instead of HOA fines for unkept lawns, we offered community support visits. Sometimes people just needed help, not judgment. and every new homeowner had to attend a safety and kindness orientation, reminding them, you don't just live in this neighborhood, you live with it. We even renamed the community park after Eli's Hope Garden. Every child planted a flower there that summer. Some red, some yellow, some white. A garden of color growing from a story of pain. The truth I learned as I stood there one evening, watching the sun set over Eli's Hope Garden. I realized something simple but powerful. Silence protects the wrong people. And fear, especially the fear of getting involved, destroys more than it saves. That night I sat on my porch listening to the calm hum of the neighborhood. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel angry. I felt responsible, because doing the right thing shouldn't depend on what the HOA says. It should depend on what's human, and somewhere far away, a little boy named Eli was probably sleeping peacefully. No more screams, no more bruises, just dreams. A year later, the local paper ran a story. Local HOA becomes model for community welfare program. The same HOA that once said, don't get involved, was now teaching others how to get involved. The right way. Sometimes, it takes one act of courage to burn down years of cowardice. And sometimes, it takes the cry of a child to wake an entire community. If you see something wrong, don't wait for permission to care. Being human comes before being a homeowner.